Hi everyone, Steve Seinberg here. Thanks for joining me for a look at this week's upcoming astrological events. I practice astrology under the name Arrow in Flight. You can find me at my website, arrowinflight.com, or at several different social media platforms. All that information is in the box down below this video. So here we go. Let's look at what's coming our way this week up there that will affect us down here. So there's a couple things happening on June 5th that I wanted to highlight for you. And I should state up front that the following list of astro events is not by any means exhaustive. There's always lots of stuff happening up there if you want to look for it. I'm just going to kind of flag the ones that stood out to me the most, that I thought would help most of us to kind of be aware of. So on June 5th, tomorrow, we're going to start the week with two events that I wanted to talk about. The first is called a quintile. It's a kind of link between planets that is sort of characterized by kind of a unlikely alchemical kind of feel. Things can happen in unusual ways that usually wouldn't work, but while the quintile's in effect, they just might. So this one involves the two planets Jupiter and Saturn. It's a really interesting mix of energies because Jupiter, to really kind of put it in a nutshell, is about expansion. It's about other things, but that's one of the main principles of the Jupiter effect. It makes things grow, it makes things get bigger. Saturn, on the other hand, is almost exactly the opposite. It makes things contract and get smaller. Saturn's about restrictions and limitations. So how do these two things work together without simply canceling each other out? I thought of an example from the real world that I can put on the table here that we can examine that I think really applies. Think about the tomato. If you've ever grown tomatoes, you know that you can't just plant them and let them run wild. You kind of have to give them some structure. If you just let tomatoes grow unchecked, they will spread out across the ground, they will rot in place and die, and you won't get much of a yield at all. But if you give them some structure, if you drive in some stakes near each plant or build a sort of trellis structure, the tomatoes will wind themselves up the vertical columns of the stakes or the trellises, and they will deliver a booming yield. They love that kind of growth opportunity. So the tomato is an example of the ability that we have as humans to impose some limitation, some structure, but think of it as limiting their growth. We're telling the tomato, you can't just grow anywhere you want. I'm dictating how you must grow. So that's a limitation. It's Saturnian. But when we do that, the tomato responds with this Jupiter-like explosion of growth. So the idea is, in our lives, while this transit's in effect, and it will peak tomorrow and then remain pretty much in effect for another month or so. So it's a great window of opportunity. You have the ability to maybe practice the same kind of technique with things in your own life. What isn't growing the way you want it to right now? Think about that, identify some you might call them problem areas, they're just not responding. And then think about structure you can add, some limitations, smart limitations you can apply, and then see if these things respond with growth like the tomato would upon driving a stake into the ground above it. I highly recommend some experimentation. You have a month, so try it out and see what you can accomplish in this area with that kind of magical quintile. So the next thing that's happening also on the 5th is it's a relationship called a sextile. It's a little different than the quintile. The sextile is more two planets trying to merge their energies, but in ways that the planets excite each other. They like each other's agendas, they want each other to succeed, they enjoy what's going on, and they want to be a part of it. So there's a very excitation kind of quality. Think about two kids alone at home talking about the subject of egging a house comes up. Minor teenage vandalism. So imagine one of the kids, and they're pretty good kids, imagine one of them bringing up the subject and the other one saying, you've egged houses? I didn't. Well, no, but I find it interesting. Have you? Well, I never saw myself as an egger, says the one kid. Talk continues, and they end up kind of goading each other into going out and splattering all the neighboring houses with eggs. So each one alone might not have gone to that level of activity, but together they have excited each other into this new level of, you might call it achievement or accomplishment, depending on your views. But they got some things done that weren't going to get done, for better or for worse, by acting together. So the sextile can have that sort of effect. The two planets rise to new heights of activity that they might not have accomplished by themselves. So that's happening on the 5th, tomorrow, between the planet Mercury and the planetoid called Chiron. We say planetoid because Chiron has some characteristics of a planet and some characteristics of an asteroid. It's not really either one, so it's a special kind of character, the planetoid. Mercury is all about communication. It's about our logical left brain. It's about our relationship with things like language, ideas, symbols, information. Chiron, on the other hand, is named for a figure in mythology called the wounded healer. So the planetoid Chiron talks a lot about the intrinsic sort of soul wounds or wounds in our psyche that we carry with us throughout life that tend to recur. We kind of re-injure these parts of ourselves in patterns, it seems. It could be sort of like a karmic feel almost. And Chiron can talk also about healing from those and other wounds, how we heal ourselves, how we heal others. So while the sextile is in effect between these two, it's linking our communication function with that wound and healing kind of concept. So how would this play out in real life? I'm reminded of the phrase suffering in silence. That's something that our society seems to admire. People who can take a lot of pain and not burden others with their aches and wounds and maladies and afflictions. We admire that. When Mercury, our communication function, is in the sextile relationship with Chiron, it might not be the greatest time to suffer in silence. In fact, it might be quite the opposite. This could be sort of a gateway to healing through communication. I'm reminded here of 12-step recovery type groups where people are encouraged to get up in front of the group and share their woes, their stories, how they've dealt with their addictive issues and their experiences around it. It can be very healing for all involved, both the speaker and the listener. So during this sextile aspect, which will only last for a few days, it'll peak tomorrow and last till, say, Wednesday or Thursday, you might be feeling it. You might get great results if you share your pain with others in a realistic manner. This doesn't mean go and hassle every stranger in your path with stories of how you stubbed your toe, but significant ailments and injuries. Talk to loved ones and your confidants, and you can do that verbally. You can actually do it in written form and publish on the internet, whether by blogging or your Facebook feed. Just try to give name to your pain and see what comes of it. Another thing that's possible, worth exploring, experimenting with, again, is the healing power of the voice. Try singing, try speaking soothingly to your loved ones, your children, your pets, your plants, and see what comes of that. So communication and healing, having a very mutually beneficial relationship at the early part of this week. Then we're going to fast forward ahead to the 9th, where we have almost a veritable cornucopia of astro-events. There are several things on tap for the 9th. So the first is another sextile, that mutually exciting ability of the planets to work together. So this one involves the planet Venus and the planet Mars. This is a really interesting aspect. Venus, among other things, is about our drive toward romance. It's about our drive toward having all kinds of relationships, including platonic ones, but definitely romance. Mars, on the other hand, is about a sort of basket of concepts as well, but one of those would be the sex drive, lust, and passion are Mars concepts. So most of the time we think of these things as going hand in hand, romance and sex. We would ideally like them to go hand in hand, but they're not interchangeable, they're not identical, and it's not guaranteed that if one shows up to the party, the other will also be there. It's pretty common in human experience to like someone that you're not sexually attracted to, or the opposite, to be turned on by someone you don't like very much, who's not very good for you as a match. Very possible to have these kind of disconnects happen between our romance and our sex drives. However, while this sextile is in effect, you might already be feeling it now, and it will last, after peaking on the 9th, it will last for another week or so till about the 16th. It will be probably a great period for existing relationships, for people who are already coupled up to get a lot of mileage out of their relationships. A great time to blend romance and sex. And if you're not in a relationship, this would be probably a fantastic time to go seeking one, to look for new companionship, go out and do some social things, or if you're open to online dating, it might be a great time to pursue something like that. Just put your intention to engage with others in this way out there, and I can't guarantee anything, but it seems likely that others will also be in the same sort of mode. So if only this aspect could be brought into being around us every Valentine's Day, I think our society would be a lot happier on the whole. But it's here now. It's not Valentine's Day, but it's here now. So go out there and make use of it. Same day, full moon in Sagittarius. So this could be extra important if you're a very Sagittarian type of person, if you have a lot of Sagittarius placements in your chart. So if your sun is in Sagittarius, your moon, if Sagittarius is your rising sign, or you have several planets there, you want to check your chart to verify if you don't already know offhand. But the full moon could be a very powerful time for you Sagittarian people. And even if not, even if that doesn't describe you, you can still get a lot of benefit out of the full moon if you kind of pitch your activities and your intentions towards Sagittarian themes and concepts. Sagittarius is the sign of the explorer, the traveler, the wanderer. Sagittarius likes to roam far and wide. So it might not be realistic for you to travel across the globe and back on the full moon. That's probably not going to happen. But you can still get some Sagittarian flavor into your life on the 9th, on or around the 9th. So what might that look like? Oh, you could try some exotic cuisine, you could watch a foreign film, you could talk to people from far off places, you could get on the internet and literally talk to people who are in far off places at that moment. These are all Sagittarian kind of exploits. Higher learning is another Sagittarian thing, exploration into vast fields of knowledge, so that it's like metaphorical travel, fields like the law, religion, philosophy. If you're interested in studying these kinds of large, expansive fields, this might be a great time to kind of look into some of that as well. And finally, on the 9th, the planet that rules Sagittarius, Jupiter, is turning direct. So since February 6th, for the last 4 months, Jupiter has been in retrograde motion. We all kind of know about Mercury retrograde. It seems even people who don't really study astrology have heard of it and kind of fear Mercury retrograde. Retrograde isn't necessarily bad. It doesn't mean things are definitely going to go off the rails and you will suffer. Mostly what it means is that the planet that is in retrograde motion, the energies that it symbolizes will be working inwardly for you, not out in the world as much as they normally would be. So for the last 4 months, most of our growth, we talked about Jupiter, is growth and expansion. Most of that has been happening probably in the inward kind of plane. So in ways that we might be aware of, but people around us might not see, the world at large might have no clue that this growth is going on inside of you. But on the 9th, things shift so that Jupiter that was inward is now moving outward. And it could be a very happy time. Everybody likes Jupiter. It's almost everyone's favorite planet. And I like to compare Jupiter to Santa Claus. It's like Jupiter will ride into town on its sleigh, throwing presents every which way and hooking people up with great business connections and passing out money and just bringing good cheer, essentially. So think about that. If everybody's good cheer and expansion was inward and now it's turning outward, this could be a really great time, a really welcome kind of relief. We've had some dark incidents out there in the last few months, and you can't pin it all on Jupiter being retrograde, but this might be a really welcome development. So it looks to be a really good week. No tricky or friction heavy events happening up there. They're mostly pretty positive and promising, optimistic events. So it looks like a great week and probably the start of a really good month. So I hope everyone can put some of this info to good use. If you would like more information about how this will affect you, that's always a great step to take. What I just spoke in generalities, but you kind of want to know, based on my own unique birth chart, how does all this stuff affect me? Will it hit me hard or will I barely feel it? Some of this you need to look at your birth chart and see exactly where the planets all line up compared to where they were when you were born. If you don't know how to do that, that's where astrologers come in. You can use my contact information. I'd be happy to set up an appointment with you to walk you through some of this and analyze your birth chart a little bit and tell you how these transits, we call them, up there might affect you. And you can find, like I said, my contact information down below this video. I would love to hear from you. And I will look forward to chatting with you again next week about subsequent astro events. Thanks, everyone. I will talk to you soon.